So we acknowledge the First Nations people as the original inhabitants of this country. We recognise, respect and celebrate the cultural distinctions and traditions of Indigenous people and value their rich and positive contribution to society. We pay our respects to the traditional owners and custodians of the land we work on and acknowledge all elders, warriors, past, present and emerging. My apologies, Recklink family. Just a bit out of breath because we just did a fitness session with Sana, but we're very, 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 very lucky and happy to have Phone Photography 101 with Vanessa. So we'll hand over to you, Vanessa, and this is an interactive class. So if you've got any questions, please ask Vanessa. So we're going to stay on with you, Vanessa, but we'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much. Yeah, please do hop in if you have any questions at all. I'm not great about monitoring the chat, so please don't be shy to just jump in here and yell out and unmute and ask your question. I'd be more than happy to help out or try and clarify anything. Great. Well, thanks, Brendan. Thanks, Sana. That's awesome. My name's Vanessa. If you haven't tuned in before, I am a professional photographer. I do wedding photography. And I'm so stoked to share a few little tips with you guys today. It's actually my last session today. So it's a tiny bit of a recap going over some of, I guess, the most important, most fun little tricks and tips. So yeah, so I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. Let's see, here we are. Sorry, it takes me just a sec. All right, now. All right. So yes, like I said, this is the kind of the recap version of Phone Photography 101. And we'll get into it. Yeah, please do yell out if you have any questions at all. So and we'll get through as much of this as we can because I couldn't pick really what to put in. And so I tried to just put all of it in. So it's been what, 5 or 6 weeks all squished into one session. So we'll get as far as we can. And we'll start with exposure. So exposure is simply the amount of light that comes into your camera and turns basically your sensor into the photo that it sees, that it's taking a photo of. It determines how light and how dark your picture looks. And what's called a good exposure is something that just kind of represents what it looks like in real life. So that's kind of generally what you go for when you're looking for a good exposure. Exposure is controlled in 3 ways. As you see down here, there's ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. And so we'll quickly touch on all of those and what you can kind of do with them. ISO is the sensitivity of your phone sensor to light. So how quickly and how much it can absorb in the amount of time that you're taking a photo. The aperture is the amount of light that can come in. So it's how big your shutter is open. So how big the hole is, like literally that light's coming in. And the shutter speed is how long your shutter's open. And that's the duration of the amount of light that's coming in. And any one of these things can be raised or lowered, but to keep the balance, like if you imagine it was a scale, if you lower one, you're going to have to raise the other to compensate. And that's kind of how it works. All right, we'll move on. Okay, so there's a lot of great things that happen in your camera on automatic mode. And so one of the most important things to have turned on, in my opinion, is the HDR. And what the HDR is called, it stands for high dynamic range. And basically what that does, it does this amazing, very techy, like blending of different exposures. So if you imagine, if you're looking at this picture on the right-hand side here, there's a very dark part and there's a very light part. So if you tried to pick an exposure that kind of was in the middle of those two, you're still going to have things that are very light and very dark. But what HDR can do is it'll take that really dark part and expose it well in the dark, and then it'll take the light part and expose it well in the light, and then combine them into one photo. So it's pretty cool. You get a really nice balanced photo, whether or not you have really dark or really light portions in your photo. Now ignore this, ignore the little circles I put here. This is actually for a different graphic, but it's a similar way to get there. If you have an iPhone, you go into settings, then the button that says camera, and under that, it should just say Smart HDR right here. That's this button right down at the bottom. In Samsung, which is the two kind of phones that we're looking at generally are iPhone and Samsung, though it's similar for pretty much any phone you're going to have. It's a couple extra steps. You go to settings, apps, camera settings, a couple extra buttons, and then you'll find one if you scroll down called Auto HDR. And if that's ticked on, then it'll be doing that as well. So there you go. And I think that's a great thing to keep on pretty much all the time, because it'll give you a really well exposed photo, regardless of whether or not you're doing it automatically or manually. So why ever use manual? I guess that's the question, right? Sometimes you don't want to have a good exposure, a well exposed picture. This one on the, oh, these photos are so tacky. The one on the left, now that's an auto exposure. And technically it's a good exposure because everything's kind of well lit and you can see what's going on. But imagine you wanted to take a photo that was maybe a little bit more moody or dark, or, you know, caught some different sorts of reflections, like this one on the right. So this one on the right is a manual exposure where it was just a selfie, held the camera out, turned the exposure right down to the bottom and took the photo then. And that's why it looks so dark. But it's cool because it kind of draws your eye to the sunglasses and stuff like that. So you can choose to have you know, manual exposure and create a very dark or very light photo. And there's definitely lots of times. Sorry, it's a big difference, isn't it?
Huge, yeah.
And like this one, you know, it's kind of like, it's not really that great a photo. But then this one, you know, it's a little bit more interesting visually. And neither of these have been edited or touched up or anything. Right. So yeah. And so that's the other thing, is you can create a lot of this in the editing phase, but you lose a lot of the detail and the quality of your photo if you really push it and mess with things in the editing phase. So really, it's the best place to get it right is in the initial picture. So that's why it's great to be able to control your exposure if you need to. So the big question is, how do you do that? How do you control your exposure? On iPhones, it's very easy. There's a little, you go into your just general regular old camera app, and there's a little caret, a little triangle, like arrow up the top in the middle. If you push that button, that brings you down over here to this menu. And that is your kind of more manual control center, I suppose you could say. The little circle with the plus and the minus, that's your exposure button. And you'll get a slider and you can play with it and turn it up and down. And that's pretty easy. The Samsung Galaxy, it's, you know, one more button, but you actually have a lot more control. So to get to your manual settings in the Galaxy, you click on this button over here. It says more. And then it brings you to this great big old menu over here where you have all sorts of choices, which is pretty cool. And you go to Pro, which is the top one in the middle on my phone anyway. And that brings you to this screen where you get to control all these things. You get to control your ISO, which, if you remember, it's your sensitivity to light in your sensor. So you can play with the exposure that way. Your shutter speed here, so you can create long exposures, which we'll get to in a second. And right here is the overall exposure. So that's the same as the little plus minus button on the Apple, but it's this button right here in the middle. So that's how you can control your exposure manually. It's a similar thing. It's a little slider. You have to push this off of auto mode to make it really fully manual. Now that was a lot of steps to get there. Oh, here's an example. This is what it looks like underexposed and overexposed. So that's dark and light, what you can do if you play with your manual settings. But that was a lot of buttons that you had to get to, and there is a shortcut. And this one is true for both the iPhone and the Samsung Galaxy. So you can keep in mind how to get to your manual settings the other way, but this way is super quick and super easy. It's just you go in your camera, go as if you're going to take a regular old photo. And if you touch on the screen on what you want to, you know, focus on, a little icon will come up. And this is true in both types of cameras. It'll either be a yellow square like this one or a yellow circle, and there'll be a sun right next to it. And if you go and you scroll up next to that sun, up or down, that will change the exposure straight away. It's a nice little shortcut. Here's one, you pulling the sun down to make it darker, pushing the sun up to make it lighter. So that's a really handy little quick, super quick way to control your exposure without having to go into your manual menu.
That's really nice, Vanessa.
It's super quick and really easy. Yeah. So you can actually kind of forget the other way. This is so much faster. All right, how are we going anyway? Good. We're moving. All right. So the next one, are there any questions about being able to control your exposure before we move on to the next one? No worries. Cool. All right. So the next one of the three, if you remember, there was ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. This one is aperture. Aperture has another name that people often call it. It's called an f-stop. And that is simply the size of the opening that your phone's shutter opens. So it could be a tiny little hole, or it could be a great big hole. And you can see them right here. There's a lineup of them, and they all have a different number attached. And that's written as F/ and then the number. The bigger the number, so say you had an F22, that's a tiny little hole. And the smaller the number is a big hole. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but that's how they run it. Now, aperture, you can control exposure, but you can also control the depth of field, which is something that is a pretty cool little thing. The depth of field is, I guess, how far into your photo your focus goes. So if you had what's called a shallow depth of field, that means the distant background is going to be really blurry because your focus only goes shallow into your picture. If you had a deep depth of field, that's the opposite. So it'd be like this photo down the bottom, where the stuff in the far background is a little bit sharper, or even completely sharp in some cases. And so that is a very, very deep depth of field. And depth of field is a really fun thing to be able to play with because it can focus your eye on what you want the viewer to see. So say this picture up on the upper left, it's quite obvious that the photographer wants you to look at these leaves because that's the only thing in focus. So it's kind of directing your eye right at it. And so I'm going to show you how to get that effect and control how much depth of field you can have in your photo, because you can control that, which is pretty cool. So the way you get there is through portrait mode. So most phone cameras have it these days. And I'll show you how to get there. Okay, well, we'll show you how to get there in a second. So you can manually adjust the depth of field using an f-stop control slider. So you can make it a deep depth of field like this picture, or a shallow depth of field like this one. With iPhones, what you do is you go to your manual control center, same way we did with the exposure, by pushing on this little caret that's up the top. And when it's in this manual exposure mode, first I should say you should get into portrait mode, which is in your camera, it's right next to the regular photo. It'll say portrait mode. Once you're in portrait mode, then you click on this little caret and it'll bring you down to this portrait mode controller. And when you see this little F right here, that's the button that controls your f-stop. So it controls your depth of field and how much or how little you want to have. So when you click on the F, a little slider bar will come up right here, and you can make it less or you can make it more. So this is a high number in your f-stop. You're going to have only a little bit of blur, like in this photo. And if you had a low number, you'll have more blur. So that one's a little bit more blurry in the background than this one. And you can control that in portrait mode on your iPhone, which is pretty cool. It's very, very similar in the Samsung. So if you go back to that menu under the More button, you'll see there's one also called portrait mode, and it's right here, and you can click on it. And that too has a slider. It's called a little bit different. It's called intensity instead of f-stop, which is fine. You know, it's still pretty easy to understand. So you can go from an intensity of 0, which means your background is sharp, to an intensity of 7, which means your background is blurry. So that's one way. That's how you can control your depth of field in a Samsung and an iPhone. I know I'm flying through this really, really fast. So I'm sure it's really hard to catch up and keep up, but please do yell out if you guys have any questions. But anyway, this is a really, really fun thing to play with. And if you have a chance today, you should go out and fiddle around with your portrait mode, because this is probably one of the best tips, I think, in taking a really professional looking photo on your phone. Because usually you don't really see that shallow depth of field on a phone. You know, you see it with the big lenses and the big cameras. So it's a great way to be able to control that. And then lastly, shutter speed. So shutter speed is the last one of the 3 things that controls your exposure. Shutter speed also controls blur not the background blur like we had in the f-stop and the aperture, but motion blur. So what motion blur is if you have your camera shutter open for a long period of time and something is moving as you take a picture, it's going to record that thing as it moves and it'll come out as a blur. So you can see that happening in these photos down the bottom. So these are all different shutter speeds, and shutter speeds are written as a fraction of a second. So they're very, very, very quick for the most part. This one on the left is 1/1000th of a second. So it's very sharp. So even though he's hitting this hammer down quite quickly, it's frozen in time. It's nice and crisp because it was such a short amount of time. And then you
remember asking about this one, Vanessa.
Yeah.
That shutter speed's perfect for if you want to potentially catch some rain or an animal, a bird flying.
Yeah, something. Oh, there you can get some really incredible pictures of birds flying because you actually get their feathers really crisp and sharp. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And it's good for sports. Like if you wanted to take a picture of someone running, actually either one would be good for sports depending on the motion. Like you could get a cool longer exposure with, say, someone trying to like kick a soccer ball and their whole leg would be a blur, but the rest of them would be sharp. So there's really, you can take a lot of cool ways. So you can either have something all sharp or a little bit of blur.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's great in so many different applications. It's really, really useful. For the most part.
Oh, we had a question. Sorry, Vanessa.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to have a look.
What is the function of piano in camera? I mean,
a piano. Yeah, sure. Now the piano is, it's just another way to, it's taking a really long photo. So what you can do with piano is you start your photo over here, and then you can move your camera around and it'll record that whole scene in one great big long strip. So that's a really, really cool effect. And that's, that's just on your main camera menu. And so it's a really great one to use as well. You can also, I think it was Sam who pointed out, you don't have to do it sideways the way that everybody does. You can actually do it vertically too. Like if you want to take a picture of a great big tree and maybe someone's standing next to a tree, you can have that vertical panorama, even though it's vertical, same thing. And get that
really interesting.
Yeah. So it's a really cool effect.
That's a great question, and thank you for that. I'm really going to give that one a go, Vanessa.
I saw a trick with the pano feature as well, where you can take a photo of someone and then you stop and then you get that person to move and then you keep going,
and run around.
Like they're talking to the one person's talking to themselves. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. No, that's really. It's gonna be really pretty funny.
I did it as well, kicking the footy to myself.
Catching it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. No, there's heaps of fun things you can do with that. Cool. So we might just do a few more tips. I don't think we're going to get quite to the end, but I'll try and rush out the last couple little bits. The only couple tips for shutter speed. Oh, were there any more questions? Oh, good. Yeah, good, Raymond. The tool for choosing your shutter speed is the main thing you want to remember, and it's the only really important rule, is that 1/60th of a second is just about as slow as you can go holding your camera. If you want to go any longer than that, you have to rest it on something like on the table or on a tripod or something like that, because we all have a little bit of natural shake in our hands. And at anything slower than 1/60th, that's going to get picked up in your photo. So we're all, we're all human. We all kind of move just a tiny bit and that'll get picked up. So anything slower than 1/60th, try and rest it on something. That's really helpful. Okay, so I'm just going to show you where your shutter speeds are again. Same menu. When you go into the Pro menu, I'll point out again, I did mention it just before. This one is your shutter speed button. And it's a slider. You click on it, it's a slider, and you can get all the different shutter speeds. So you can have a little play around with these kind of slower shutter speeds where you get that motion blur. And that's a really fun thing to be able to play with. And when you do play with those long exposures, the long shutter speeds, you can get some really cool effects. So things like this photo on the left is just someone who's run around and kind of drew this in the air with a sparkler. And then they've made a little picture because your camera was recording that whole time that they were running around and moving it. And it's the same thing here on the road photo. It was such a long exposure resting on an overpass or a bridge that all these cars had enough time while the shutter was open to move that whole distance. And so the camera recorded their headlights and the taillights. So it looks like kind of like a light river, which is pretty cool. So these are long exposures. Generally, they take just a bit of fiddling around. It's always a bit of just guess and check work because there's no perfect equation because every light situation is going to be different. And so I can't really tell you, oh, you put it on this number and this number and this number. It's just getting out there and giving it a go. So you want to put your aperture way down. You want to put your exposure way down and your shutter speed way up. So it's open for a long amount of time, but not letting very much light in. Also, you can put your ISO even right down. And then that'll get these good exposure, but with a long shutter speed. Now, there's a really easy way to do it if you have an iPhone. And this is like such a sneaky shortcut and you can get such cool photos. So if you have a newish iPhone, it has something called live photos. And if you've ever played with those before, it's just a regular photograph, but your camera actually records it for like a second. So it's more like a second's worth of video rather than a photo. And what you can do is you put it on live mode, take your photo. You can scroll up and there'll be a little menu of things you can do with your live photo. So you can like bounce your video, make it bounce back and forth. You can do all sorts of stuff like that. And the last one, as you scroll over, is, oops, didn't mean to go that far, is long exposure. So it's super handy. You just push the long exposure button. What it does is basically average that whole second's worth of video. And anything that is stationary, like these rocks you see, they stay stationary, but anything that's moving is kind of all averaged together in that long exposure. So it looks like it's kind of misty or moving. So you get that sense of movement rather than this one here that's static. And so it gives it a really kind of cool effect. And that's what a long exposure does. And this is such a cool little shortcut. It's just a one-touch button thing. Makes it really, really accessible and easy. Here we go. So that's your live exposure button or your live photo button. You take your photo, you scroll up on it in your editing kind of area, your photos, and you scroll over and you'll find over here, it says long exposure. Push it and boom, all of a sudden you have a long exposure, which is awesome. Now, unfortunately, Samsung doesn't have the same equivalent. It's a little bit harder. And that's the one I was talking about where you have to be a bit fiddly and guess and check. And so this one's probably on the advanced side of the phone photography scale, but really accessible to anyone as long as you're willing to keep at it, keep guessing and checking and trying it and changing things. So do give that a go if you can. I'm going to rush through that. And then the last one where you can get a little bit of the same effect is in your night mode. There's night mode in both Samsung and iPhone. And you'll see that is like the exposure length. And you can change that by pressing on it and there'll be a slider. So if you want to make it shorter or longer, you can take that night mode photo, long exposure photo. But you can only do it when it's dark, which is funny. So I can't even show you right now because it's too bright out. So go lock yourself in a closet, see if you can find the button, change it, or go out at night. I suppose you could do that too. That's pretty much it. I know that was a huge, huge rush right at the end, especially, but I see Shaun's here and can't wait to get started on the renaturing. So thanks to everybody who was able to hop on over the last couple of weeks. And we'd still love to see what you guys are up to, even way on into the future. So feel free to upload any of your photos to Instagram. We've got the RecLink Arts hashtag is also the RecLink Connect one. So thanks so much, guys. I know that was a bit of a whirlwind today, but thanks for the questions and thanks for tuning in. I'll pass it over to Shaun. Oh, hold on. I think I'm the one who needs to get out of my share.
Thanks, Vanessa. Thank you.
No worries.
Lovely to see you and your beautiful photos and hints.
All right, there we go.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you, Vanessa. And yeah, I think we had a few questions in there. So hopefully your questions got answered. If you do have any other questions, feel free to quickly ask those if you like. Look at Brendan's cool photos there.
Oh, yeah.
That's good. The lighting is so cool on that one. It came out really well.
Yeah, Vanessa's photo actually, like Shaun sent me a message this morning of the sun with the clouds, you know, and he sent me this beautiful message. Excuse me. And then I took one back and sent it both to Vanessa and Shaun, and actually it's quite amazing. It doesn't do it justice, but it looks like a mountain. You know? So Vanessa, that last photo you had of, you know, those rocks inspired me.
Good.
So massive thank you to you.
Thanks,
Excuse
Vanessa.
me, I just had a little bit of, there's this funny saying, Karina says there's no time for eating or going to the toilet on Reckling Connect, and that is
just keep rolling.
so true. I sort of like try to just eat when we can, and but I really, really love that class, Sana. It's just we thank you for your contribution, Vanessa. We'd love you to come back, because it's great to have that interaction. And I know Sana's been taking lots of beautiful photos of Tara, and, you know, just through Shaun, I've been getting out and about, you know, taking photos of nature because of you guys. So, you know,
thank you so much, guys. Yeah, it's awesome. We're going to miss you, Vanessa.
We'll have to come back and come up with some other thing to do, like drawing or something.
Yeah,
actually. Hey, Vanessa, do you only do wedding photography? Do you do other types of?
I've done some portraiture, you know, just mostly families down at the beach and that kind of thing, which is
what about first birthday parties?
Oh, no, I don't know that I've ever done one of those, but always fun. Kids are hilarious. Kids are so hard to work with, but they come out great. 10-year-olds are probably a bit easier.
I'll send you an email. I didn't know anyone in the area.
Reckling Connect at its best, just connecting and looking for opportunities. It's a really good, I think, you know, we've got this recording, so we just might just keep it moving forward. We'll just bring up the program. They're two beautiful avatars of Vanessa and Shaun. They're probably my two most favorite avatars.
Oh, what about the one before that?
That one's pretty buff. Three most favorite ones, actually. Shaun's in some nature there. So Shaun's got his buff top on, and I reckon, Shaun, that really emulates you, mate, because I've noticed you've had a lockdown haircut, mate.
Well, you saw it in the future, Brendan. You saw it.
Well, I mean, Shireen's done a marvelous
job. He had a vision.
Job. Yeah, look how and you look very buff and
very fit, man.
The sleeves are a bit. I don't see wear short sleeves like that, though, Brendan. I haven't got the, you know.
Wow.
How did you Sana's class?
Oh, jeez. It's great to laugh and smile, actually, Shaun, and we'll just do a quick welcome to country. And please, Vanessa, join in on this conversation. We acknowledge the First Nations people as the original inhabitants of this country. We recognise, respect and celebrate the cultural distinctions and traditions of Indigenous people and value their rich and positive contribution to society. We pay our respects to traditional owners and custodians of the land we work on and acknowledge all elders, warriors, past, present and emerging. So that's right, lovely Reckling people. I keep bringing up these lovely avatars. Renaturing with Shaun. We just had a great session with Vanessa. These are my three favourite facilitators.
There's no one else in the room.
Every time, son, or I'm out in nature, I'm like, oh, geez, I wish I was with Shaun. And my mum says, don't wish your life away, Brenny. But I just see things and I'm just like, oh, God, where's Shaun? I think of Shaun, you know. So how are you, Shaun? What are we talking about today, mate?
Oh, that's I feel very blessed that you think of me, Brenno. That's my brother's called Brendan too, you know. He's one of my closer brothers, and they're all close, I should say. I suppose, in terms of age. So, Brendan. So I do think of you like a bro there. So thank you. Today, Brendan, I really wanted to talk about how when we sort of relate to how we're traveling through the day, how we sort of think about different things that are happening in our day, in our life, just feel behind it. So rather than narrow in on what is happening, or anything really, anything that comes into your thought processes, comes into your awareness at all, sort of pull away from it rather than engage in the actual thought processes, and see if you can feel what type of flow that gives you internally. So what I mean by that is, as humans, we have a choice we can make at any moment to basically flow with nature's harmony, or to move away from that flow. So I witnessed this morning, Brendan, when I was out watching the sun and took those photos today.
Yeah.
I just love that stuff. I get tingles, and and people look at you like a bit. What are you doing? When are you going to start exercising there, buddy? Everyone's on their walks, everyone's on their mission, and it's like they've been conditioned in a way to disconnect from their surroundings, disconnect from what actually brings your natural life form to life, to flourish. So like for example, flowers, most plants, they move towards the sun. They all grow towards where the most light is, where they feel the most flow in their form, in their energy form, in their life form, to allow the light to come through their form. But as humans, we've got this amazing ability to create lots of things in our own minds and get caught up in things that can be beautiful, that can create, fantastic artwork, or work that can help people, or technology that can aid people to connect in all different ways. But what can happen if we never actually pull back and feel how those thought processes are helping us to live, helping us to come into life, to take in the light, take in the energy around us? What can happen? We can end up living in a disconnected state. So we can then narrow in on things that feel like they're affecting our inner flow, when really we've tuned into a way of thinking and feeling that's affecting our inner flow. So by pulling back and just feeling for how you are thinking and being in any situation, you'll start to notice what things make you feel lighter, feel brighter in yourself. And then you know that you're in your flow. You know that you're flowing with nature. It's really that simple. It's nothing to get too, complicated about here, or get into the psychology of what you're thinking about. Because really, that's all that psychology's doing. That's all that counseling's doing. That's all that wellness stuff is doing. It's helping us to flow, our natural form to flow more with nature's harmony. So yeah, Ren, I thought we'd go into that today. And
Shaun, I've seen these beautiful trees where I took that photo. I'll take a photo in the morning and send it to you and Vanessa.
Yeah.
And they're these beautiful trees that are sort of like, I think, are being cut. And then, I kid you not, it was meant to be this conversation. A couple of shoots are shooting out to the sun.
Oh, bang.
Yeah.
Bang, Reno.
Because like you just said, nature's trying to get to the sun. So it's got the growth here, and then there's a shoot that's just like, I'll take a photo, I'll send it to both you guys. It's just talking straight about what you're saying about nature's just trying to find that sun so it can grow and flow.
The sun's like the center of our universe because it has no shadow. It's pure light. So everything is trying to get some of that sun. Like in the ocean, the further you go down, the less and less life there is. So in a way, we're like an ocean, and our conscious mind is like that part of us that can either choose to go down or choose to come up towards the surface and take in the light. So that's
it's such an interesting what you're talking about too, because around here we got hit by the bushfires pretty hard last
Where are you,
couple summers
Vanessa?
ago, down in Malakuta.
Oh,
And our
lovely.
town was hit pretty hard, and everything, all the bushland around us was burned, and a really intense heat too. So it was all just blackened and charred. But it's been so interesting watching the regrowth, and especially out of these gum trees, you get something called Epicormic growth, where you'll have the trunk, so you'll have cells, the tree trunk cells, but they have this ability to change into a different type of cell. And so what they do is they turn into tiny little branches and leaves that just come straight off of the trunk, because they're doing exactly that. They know the way they need to heal themselves is to get to that sun, and the way that those plants collected is through the leaves. And so the cells of the trees actually change themselves to turn into something that can get up there and get that energy and the light, and then repair, and then turn back into like kind of the regular tree shape or whatever. It's such a good metaphor, the way you're talking about it to people.
Yeah, well, that I suppose we are, like, once upon a time we all would have thought of ourselves like that, thought of ourselves like a tree rather than a separate entity to what we see, because we're no different. We're really just another form of nature expressing itself. So the difference of us is that we can disconnect from that natural intelligence as they're pushing us up and helping us to absorb more of that energy around us that helps us to grow and flourish in our form, in our natural form. And that'll flow through your whole life once you do. And you get a taste of it, you get that taste where you're in your flow in your day, and it's like, before you might have banged your head on something that you've been over to get when you're in a grumpy sort of off mood, and then you just miss it when you're in that flow. I notice this when I'm walking along in bare feet, because if you clip a rock, you know about it, and it's usually because where I'm at, in my own self. So it's like on the days you're in that flow, instead of hitting the rocks, you'll skim over the top. And
wow.
So there's all these little signs, that you're in flow, and that's what nature's doing. It's giving us these little signs and signals that you are either sprouting up and getting that light and energy that we need to get ourselves reinvigorated, to spread ourselves out into the world, or we're doing things that are restricting that flow. And after a while, our life form will start to feel more and more restricted, and that'll reflect outwards. So Vanessa, to witness it in nature, that it's almost a little things twig in your subconscious. It's like there's an inner knowing that starts to wake up the more you witness it. Which you probably felt this morning, Brendan, when you saw that.
Oh yeah.
Straight up, like a sense of wonder, a sense of awe, and that aligns you with pure life, pure essence. Yeah.
Well, you encouraged it.
Oh.
Because you sent me that beautiful message, and then I've actually looked up at the, because when you took that photo, I think it was pretty soon to when you took that photo, and I've looked up and gone, wow, cool, and just took it using a few of little Vanessa's tricks.
Yeah.
Like your photo was incredible.
I really
the sun and the
Vanessa's
clouds.
Photos. They were amazing, Vanessa. Like to see that mist over the water, to see it in flow like that. Yeah, I think photos are such a good tool. I take so many photos because it helps you focus in on something that's just pure life-giving energy. Quite often we skip over things, like the amount of people I watch, and there'll be this amazing sky, just like incredible, and to me, I can't miss it. I can't not sit there and take it in. you mentioned it to someone else and they'll sort of almost brush over it. Oh yeah, should have seen the one yesterday though. So that, you know what I mean? It's like we've been conditioned in a way in our modern societies not to relish in that, not to take that in. When once upon a time the sun was a god for a lot of cultures. It was actually worshipped. And even yogis, they do a thing called sun like a sun worship in the morning, because in the morning you can actually like look at the sun directly, when it's first coming up. It is a little point there where it doesn't really affect your eyes. So, and what that does, it unconsciously awakens your life form. So it can help to see more light through your day by taking in that light physically through the sun. So yeah, a photo can be a great way to absorb it. But even once you do take the photo, just take it in, take that picture in fully, like the whole width of it. Take it in until you start to actually feel some form of bliss in you, or tingles, or some sensation that actually lets you know that your body has actually felt that. You haven't just mentally seen it and captured it. You've actually felt that in your whole being. You felt it into your heart, which will then flood through your whole existence. What's that, Brendan? What do you got there?
Yeah, I love taking notes for your session, Shaun, and I just wrote "take it in." Yeah, that's fine, Vanessa.
I have to go. Sorry to my next class, but I do love. I love like staying into the session. It just leaves you on such a nice, upbeat, a positive note before charging into the rest of the afternoon. Unfortunately, Tuesdays are my super busy day, but
I love you sitting in there, Vanessa. It's really
anyway,
nice
thanks so much.
Thank you.
I wish I could stay for the rest of it.
We'll see you soon, Vanessa. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah,
it's just it's really interesting. It's important. Yeah, take a photo, but take it in, enjoy it for what it is, and get that truly natural high, so you understand the flow.
Yeah, because that becomes like a little reference point for your day almost, Brent. I don't know if you're sort of starting to feel that now, because you've been doing, regular.
Being honest, mate, it's pretty funny. Pete and myself were in a meeting with a few Reclink staff, and there was thunderstorms. And Pete goes, I went and checked it out. It's about 2 in the morning, and everyone's started laughing. And I said, yeah, I did too, actually. Everyone's like, what's going on with you guys? I said, Shaun. It's just because it's to see nature and, the hailstones or smell the fresh air. Like, I love sitting next to, we've got this window.
Yeah.
So when it rains, I love actually seeing it.
Yeah.
Or I love actually smelling the fresh air. I'll sit next to the window and smell the fresh air come through.
Yeah.
I just like, there's just, even if it's whatever time it is in the morning, I just wanted that to experience it,
Yeah.
And people are like, what's wrong with you guys? It's like, well, actually, what's wrong with you guys? Because you're missing out on so much beautiful nature that's actually making you feel better.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's that and what that does, Brent, it's like almost you're actually connecting yourself in with life, and you're moving away from those parts that are disconnected from life.
Okay.
So you're actually moving into a whole new reality, Brennan, and reality that's aligned with nature, which is really aligned with how our whole universe spins. And,
geez, I'm liking that.
What creates life. So that's the significance of it, Brent. Like, you're actually, when you're in those moments of awe and wonder, you're actually in the same energy that creates worlds. You're in that same place. There's lots of different authors and inspirational speakers and spiritual speakers that speak about, this law of attraction and all these types of things that bring in what we want to create in our lives. And that happens when we align ourselves with what actually creates life. So in those moments, you're actually creating a whole brighter and broader world for you to live within, Brendan, in yourself, which then reflects outwards through everything you move through in your day. So it's such a, like, you think, what the heck's that going to do? Looking up at, the sun in the morning, or what's that going to do to change this problem I've got here, or that issue here, or how's that going to bring in my dream lover or whatever. But it does. It will bring it in. I've witnessed in my own life. I've witnessed the change that ripples out once you tune in to everything out that actually helps you to feel that sense of wonder, awe, and love for life, because that ripples in you and then ripples out again. So it's sort of like a two-way approach to changing your life, if that makes sense, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's been the most incredible journey since we've connected in with you and hearing about flow and renaturing, and it's had lots of positivities for me personally, and understanding about flow and just acceptance and going on that journey.
Yeah.
And just not like, just take, like, I can hear a bird just chirping, and it's just like, oh, what's he doing, or what's she doing, just want to go check it out.
I see your whole face light up when you see that, Brandon. So you witness it in others, because that gives you signs. Oh wow, I'll do that as well. So I saw you light up, and you're up talking about it, and that's bringing in the energy of all those elements that you're connecting to. That they reckon the birds are actually, they sing. When they're singing, it's like angels singing. It's actually the same energy as an angel singing to you. So all these little things, they've actually been calibrated by different people in the world that are able to work on wavelengths in a science way as well, that helps to measure and then bring these logical connections into what we are taking in around us. So all these little things, that it's like, that's what I love about sharing this work, Brandon, because it all those things you feel might be happening, there's now stuff saying that is happening. There's now stuff that's showing the mystical stuff is actually physically happening in yourself. So it's I suppose, I think the big thing, the takeaway for today was witnessing how you light up in yourself when you connect to different things through your day. And it might be something outwards, something such as the tree you connected with this morning, or the sky, but then take in how you connect with your computer. Take in how you connect with your phone when certain people call. Take in how you connect when you start your day and move into your work mode. What's the difference there with your inner flow compared to when you start the day looking up at the sun and taking in all this beauty all around you? What's the drop off? What is there a drop off? If so, can you think about whatever you're doing where you feel the drop off in a way that helps you feel that flow like you would out in nature? Because that's really what we're trying to get through here, I think, Brendan, to everyone and anyone out there, is how we feel out there in our special spots in nature can be replicated anywhere. So it's really changing your thought processes, your patterns around how you think and feel in situations where you feel the drop off, where you feel your life form diving down into the depths of the ocean rather than looking up into the light part of the ocean. Yeah.
It's interesting
Yeah.
you say that, you know, because sometimes I would just love to get this and just chuck it out the window. Or
Yeah.
sometimes I'd love to get this laptop and
Yeah.
just heave it that way. But at the moment, there's a lot of people counting on me. And this platform that we're creating has extensively grown me as a person. You know, about an hour ago, I did about 20 squats and boom, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So
Half an hour ago, I'm learning how to take some nice photos.
Yeah.
Now I'm learning about nature and flow.
Yeah.
So
do you
it's
feel
a very
the
good
difference
point
there,
you make.
Brendan? Sorry, Brendan. Do you feel the difference there in yourself? So this is the pullback and the witnessing. So the way you started to appreciate what you actually do during your day, rather than honing in on what frustrates you through your day, is a big, like your whole face changed. Your whole way of speaking changed. You became from wanting to tensing up with your hands to sort of your hands started to lighten up and your face. So that's witnessing me witnessing you, but you can do that for yourself, Brennan, and anyone can, is witness how you actually interact with your day. So instead of feeling the frustration, letting that take over you, because we all get frustrated, you know, we're all human. We all want to punch something or kick something or throw something. That's just, you know, it's part of being human, but we don't have to let it take it over us. We can start to, all right, I'm feeling a bit pissed off and frustrated here. I need to change what I'm doing here so I can get back in the flow again.
Yeah.
So it might be even taking a minute just to look out the window, open up the window, get some air in, and feel that freshen your life form up. You know what I mean? Yeah. And
it's a really good point you make. You know, one of our participants actually works for a council. She's got quite a very good job, but she said she's just staring at a window.
Yeah.
So, you know, something like this program and then would be very good for her to do. And then something else that's been, and it's a fantastic segue, is you know, Tai Chi. And that's what we've got up next, Shaun. And, you know, I just find myself, and I do it really badly. Sorry, Phil. But, you know, I just really enjoy.
We all do, Brendan. We all do, mate. I've had a shocker today.
For 5 or 10 minutes, just doing a little bit of the form with Phil and the participants, really relaxing and enjoying.
How old's Tai Chi, Phil? Like it's thousands of years old.
About 5,500 years old. If you talk to my master, it's right back before the Ming Dynasty. It went through. That's why it's called martial arts, because no one was allowed to bear arms, and it was in a kind of really brutal dictatorship. So people started using farming equipment and their bodies to be able to defend themselves against people with who are bearing arms, soldiers and police. So that's how it all started out, using wheat flails and shovels and staves, you know, just things that were lying around to try and help yourself. And what Brendan was just doing there is waving hands in clouds. So you're protecting your chest with the top hand and your abdomen with the bottom hand. So that it's all about being able. So you're just going through movements that you would be going through in Kung Fu, but without having a training partner. That's what Tai Chi really developed, was to develop the muscles that you need in those movements.
Yeah. Oh, it's a wonderful. I've done a fair bit of Qigong over the years, and
I do Qigong as well.
Yeah.
I was doing Chen style today, which is the original and hardest of them all. And I haven't actually done any training for a few weeks, but I put the DVD on today. I went, oh dear, I've modified this a little bit, haven't I? And I kind of had to relearn, and I got to a point where I went, do you know what? I'm gonna just have a little acceptance over the next 20 minutes, and then tomorrow I'm gonna go back to it and not try and do form 15, but try and do form 8, because that's really where I lost it last time. And so you sort of realize that you've been doing it wrong. So the mind tries to make things easier. so that you stop doing the correct forms and you start doing your modification of those forms because it's easier, which is why you need to train with other people.
Phil, when you do when you feel that alignment, when you're in the, I suppose what you call the correct form, what are you feeling yourself like afterwards? You must feel.
Well, when you do it right, when you actually mastered it, and then there was a bit today when I went, oh, right, I'm using my left hand, but that should be my right hand. And then you feel it. So you go through and you go through like that. And then you go like, and you start doing it right and you go, yeah, okay, I can feel it. So it flows through you. Everything goes through that area called the dantian, which is 3 fingers down, 3 fingers in from the bottom of the belly button.
So you lower dantian.
Yeah, it's a meridian, and it's in Reiki, and it's in all sorts of things. But that's where we channel. Everything channels from the bottom of the abdomen, so all movement should come from there. And that's a challenge in itself. So you hear me banging on all the time about concentrating on that area just below the belly button. But it takes years to realise that you have it all the time. You just didn't really know what it was, and it's much more subtle than you think. But what it actually does is actually start to engage the deep core, the deep stabilizing muscles that you can't train in the gym. Yeah. The real core muscles, and it knits everything together is what Tai Chi does so well. So it's really healing.
Yeah. Oh, I better leave you now, Phil. I'm taking.
We're cutting in.
Well, we need to wrap this.
On our hands, eh?
Well, look, it's absolutely sensational hearing these two beautiful people converse and sharing their passion of nature and flow and Tai Chi.
Yeah,
and
it crosses over, doesn't it, Brenna? Yeah.
Well, to let you know, Shaun, there's some lovely feedback in the chat box. Christine mentioned about she tries to look at the beautiful things in life: sun, wind, rain, air, and that always puts a smile on her face.
Yeah.
Carmel mentioned.
Yes.
Carmen mentioned about there's a Aussie backyard bird count happening this weekend. Sit for 20 minutes and count the birds. That's interesting.
Oh, that one. Yeah. Great.
I think we'll give that one a go. And then Wendy just said, so, this is on you, Shaun. Thanks, everyone. A great session. And it reminds me to get out in nature every day. So, you know what, Wendy? If you get a chance, potentially, if you're going to do some Tai Chi now, maybe just find a tree in your backyard safely if you can. Because Phil recommends actually to do Tai Chi in the shade of a tree. So,
I love it.
Yeah,
it's good. Yeah.
So, Shaun, we really look forward to your session next week, mate. Are you going to stay do some Tai Chi, or you got to busily run off?
Oh, I better go around. I've got a webinar next week that I'm doing. If anyone wants to join, just go to the Renature way. It's free. It's just goes through the steps around how to do it all. So could
you send me any details? And I'd love to jump in, Shaun.
Yeah, I will. Thanks, Brendan. Yeah. See you, Phil. Have a great session. Thank you again, Brendan.
Thank you, mate. And we look forward to seeing you next week if you're available, mate.
Yeah. Thanks, friend. See you, Phil.
See you, Shaun. Take care.